The dust rose in small clouds around Violet's moccasined feet as she walked the main street of Stillwater, Arizona Territory, clutching the turquoise and silver necklace that had belonged to her mother, knowing that selling it would mean losing the last tangible piece of her family, but understanding that survival mattered more than sentiment in the summer of 1878. The morning sun blazed overhead, already fierce at 9 o'clock, and Violet Cazares kept her eyes downcast as she passed the saloon where rough men stumbled out into the glaring light. Her dark hair hung in a long braid down her back, and the cotton dress she wore was faded but clean, trading the traditional Apache clothing for something that might make the white townspeople less likely to spit at her feet or cross to the other side of the street. It did not always work. She had walked 3 miles from the small camp, where she lived with her elderly uncle and his wife. The last of her family, after disease and violence, had taken the rest. The necklace weighed almost nothing in her hand, but it carried the weight of memories, her mother's fingers fastening it around her own neck when Violet was just a girl, explaining that it had been made by Violet's grandmother and contained stones pulled from the sacred mountains. Her mother had died 2 winters ago, and Violet had sworn she would never part with it. But her uncle's cough had worsened, and the medicine man wanted payment she could not otherwise provide. The general store loomed ahead, its wooden sign creaking in the hot wind. Violet had been inside only twice before, and both times the proprietor had watched her with suspicious eyes, as though she might steal something. She swallowed hard and pushed open the door. The interior was dim and cool, shelves packed with goods from back east. Flour, sugar, bolts of fabric, tools, ammunition. The man behind the counter looked up from his ledger, his expression souring immediately when he saw her. "We do not want any trouble," he said flatly. "I am not bringing trouble, I have something to sell." Violet held up the necklace, letting it catch the light filtering through the window. The turquoise stones glowed blue-green, and the silver work was intricate, beautiful even to someone with no appreciation for Apache craftsmanship. The proprietor squinted at it, then shook his head. "I am not interested in Indian trinkets. It is worth good money. The silver alone is valuable, not to me. Now get out before you drive away real customers." Violet felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she forced herself to remain calm. She needed the money. "Please, my uncle is sick." "Not my problem. Out." The door opened behind her, letting in a shaft of bright sunlight and a tall figure that blocked it almost immediately. Violet turned and had to tilt her head back to see the man's face. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that needed cutting. His jaw was shadowed with stubble, and his blue eyes took in the scene with quick intelligence. He wore dusty riding clothes and a gun belt slung low on his hips, and everything about him said cowboy. "Morning, Mr. Peterson," the newcomer said, his voice carrying a slight drawl. Having some kind of problem, the proprietor's demeanor shifted immediately to something obsequious. "No problem at all, Mr. Foster. Just explaining to this girl that I do not buy Indian goods." The cowboy's gaze shifted to Violet, and she found herself unable to look away. His eyes were startling in their color and intensity. "What are you selling?" She held up the necklace again, hating how her hand trembled slightly. "It belonged to my mother." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and horse and clean sweat. He took the necklace gently from her hand, examining it with care. "This is fine work, beautiful stones." "Turquoise from the mountains," Violet said quietly. "The silver was traded for fairly. I can see that." He turned it over, studying the way the pieces connected, the small stampings in the silver. "How much do you want for it?" Violet had rehearsed this part. She knew what the medicine man's supplies would cost, plus a little extra for food. $20. The proprietor snorted. Highway robbery for some beads and metal. But the cowboy was already reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a leather wallet and counted out bills. $20 seems fair to me. Might even be getting a bargain. Violet stared at the money as he held it out. $20 was more than she had held at one time in her entire life. It would save her uncle buy food, maybe even get them through the winter if they were careful. But taking it meant the necklace was truly gone, that last piece of her mother sold to a stranger. "Take it," the cowboy said gently, as if sensing her hesitation. "You need it." She took the bills with shaking fingers. The paper felt strange, foreign. "Thank you." He smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her heart do an odd skip. "My pleasure, miss." Violet folded the money carefully and tucked it into the pocket she had sewn into her dress. She should leave now, before something went wrong, before the proprietor called the sheriff, or someone else decided an Apache woman did not belong in town. But her feet would not move. She watched as the cowboy slipped the necklace into his own pocket, and something in her chest ached. "I hope it brings you luck," she said, the words coming out barely above a whisper. "Actually," he said, "I was thinking about that. This necklace, it is important to you, is it not? I mean, beyond the money." Violet nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The cowboy pulled the necklace back out of his pocket and held it out to her. "Then you should keep it." She stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "What? Keep it, the money is yours, the necklace should be too." "I do not understand, you bought it, and now I am giving it back." "Call it a gift if that makes more sense." The proprietor made a disgusted sound. "You are wasting your money on her, Foster." The cowboy did not even glance at him. His eyes stayed on Violet. "Not a waste. Here, take it, please." Violet reached out slowly, half expecting him to pull it back, reveal the cruel joke. But he simply placed the necklace in her palm and closed her fingers around it. The silver was still warm from his pocket. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "Because you needed the money, but did not want to lose something precious. Seemed like maybe I could help with both." He shrugged as if it were nothing, as if he handed out $20 and priceless heirlooms every day. Violet felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of these men, would not show that kind of weakness. "I do not know how to thank you. No thanks needed." He tipped his hat to her. "Take care of your uncle." She wanted to say more, to ask his name, to understand why a white cowboy would show such kindness to an Apache woman. But the words tangled in her throat, and before she could sort them out, he was turning to the proprietor, asking about supplies he needed. Violet slipped out the door into the blazing sun, her hand clutched around the necklace, the money secure in her pocket, and her mind whirling with confusion and wonder. The walk back to camp felt shorter, her feet lighter despite the heat. She bought the medicine man's supplies from a trader on the edge of town, a mixed-blood Cherokee who did not ask questions and charged fair prices. She bought cornmeal and beans and a little sugar. She even bought tobacco for her uncle, knowing he would protest the expense but would enjoy it. Her uncle, Running Deer, was sitting in the shade of their ramada when she returned, his wife Mourning Dove working nearby at grinding corn. They both looked up as Violet approached, and Running Deer's eyes went immediately to the bundle she carried. "You sold it," he said, and there was sorrow in his voice. Violet set down the supplies and pulled out the necklace. "No, I sold it and got it back." She told them the story while Mourning Dove prepared the medicine and Running Deer smoked the tobacco, his eyes watering with gratitude. They listened without interruption, and when she finished, Mourning Dove said, "This cowboy, he has a good heart." "Or he is a fool with too much money," Running Deer said, but there was no heat in it. He was already looking better, the medicine easing his cough. What was his name? Morning Dove asked. Violet realized she did not know. The shopkeeper called him Mr. Foster, that is all I heard. Foster, Morning Dove repeated. You should learn more. A man who does such kindness is rare. Why would I need to learn more? He did a good thing. That is the end of it. But Morning Dove smiled in that knowing way she had, and Violet felt her cheeks warm. She busied herself with putting away the supplies, trying not to think about blue eyes and a gentle smile. The next week passed slowly. Violet gathered what plants and herbs she could find, traded some of her weaving for eggs, and tried to pretend she was not thinking about the cowboy named Foster. She failed miserably. Every night when she fastened her mother's necklace around her throat, she remembered his hands carefully examining it, his voice saying it was beautiful work, the way he had given it back without hesitation. Running Deer improved daily, his cough fading to something manageable. Morning Dove teased Violet about being distracted, about burning food and forgetting to check the rabbit snares. Violet denied everything and knew she was not believed. On the 8th day, Morning Dove sent her to town for salt. Violet suspected this was a manufactured errand, but she could not prove it, and truth be told, she did not mind the excuse. Stillwater held a new interest for her now. The town was busier than before, a cattle drive having arrived the previous day. Cowboys filled the streets and saloons, their voices loud, their money flowing. Violet kept to the edges, avoiding attention, and made her way to the general store. A different man was behind the counter, younger than Peterson, and he served her without comment. She was leaving, her small bag of salt in hand, when she saw him. Foster stood across the street near the livery, talking with another man, his hat pushed back and his face animated. Violet froze, her heart suddenly pounding. She should leave. There was no reason to speak to him. He had been kind, she had thanked him, the transaction was complete, but her feet carried her across the dusty street anyway. He saw her coming and his expression shifted, surprise giving way to that smile she remembered. Well, hello again. Hello. Violet felt suddenly foolish. What was she doing? I wanted to thank you again for what you did. You already thanked me, but I am not complaining about hearing it twice. He turned to the man beside him. Charlie, this is the young woman I told you about, Miss Cazares, Violet supplied. Violet Cazares. Violet, he repeated, and the way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. I am Jake Foster, and this is Charlie Turner. Charlie nodded politely enough, though Violet could see the questions in his eyes. White men did not usually introduce Apache women as if they were ladies at a social function. Your uncle, is he well? Jake asked. Much better. The medicine is working. Good. That is real good. Jake seemed genuinely pleased, and Violet found herself smiling. I will not keep you from your business, she said, suddenly aware that they were attracting attention, that people were staring. You are not keeping me from anything important. Jake glanced at Charlie. I will catch up with you later. Charlie left, though not without giving Jake a look that clearly said they would be discussing this. Jake seemed unbothered. He gestured to the bench outside the livery. Would you sit for a minute, unless you need to get back? Violet knew she should say no. Nothing good could come from an Apache woman sitting in public with a white cowboy, but she found herself nodding, following him to the bench, sitting down with a careful distance between them. How long have you been in Stillwater? Jake asked. Almost 2 years. My uncle brought us here after our people were forced from our land further north. It is not our home, but it is safer than the reservation. Jake's jaw tightened. I have heard about the reservations. They are not good places. No, they are not. Violet did not elaborate. The stories were too hard, too painful. What about you? Are you from here, Colorado originally? My family has a ranch up near Denver, but I am the youngest of 4 boys. No real place for me there, so I have been drifting, working cattle drives, odd jobs. Been in Arizona territory about 6 months now. Do you like it? It is different, hotter, he grinned, but beautiful in its own way. I like the mountains, the red rocks, and the people I have met have been interesting. Violet felt her cheeks warm and ducked her head. I should go. Morning Dove will wonder where I am. Morning Dove, my uncle's wife, she is a worrier. Jake stood when she did. Could I see you again? Maybe not here in town, if that would be easier. Somewhere else. Violet's heart raced. Why would you want to see me again? Because I enjoyed talking to you just now. Because I have been thinking about you since that day in the store, wondering if you were all right, if your uncle recovered. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking suddenly uncertain. If that is too forward, I apologize. I do not mean to make you uncomfortable. You do not make me uncomfortable, Violet said quietly, but it is complicated. I know. Believe me, I know, but complicated does not mean impossible. Violet thought of Morning Dove's knowing smile, of her own sleepless nights, of the way her heart beat faster just standing near him. There is a place by the river, about 2 miles east of town. A big cottonwood tree growing alone. Do you know it? I can find it. Tomorrow, late afternoon. I will be there. Violet nodded and turned to go, then paused. Jake, thank you for the necklace, for everything. You keep thanking me, and I will have to do something else kind just to hear you say my name again. She laughed, surprised by the sound coming from her own throat, and saw his face light up at it. Then she hurried away before she could do something truly foolish, like agree to sit with him longer or touch his hand or any of the other things she suddenly wanted to do. Morning Dove said nothing when Violet returned with the salt, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. Violet ignored her silent questions and busied herself with preparing the evening meal. That night, wearing her mother's necklace, she lay awake and wondered what she was doing, if she was making a terrible mistake, if her heart was leading her somewhere dangerous. But she also thought about Jake's smile and the kindness in his eyes, and she knew that come tomorrow afternoon, she would be at the cottonwood tree by the river. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Violet tried to focus on her tasks, on the weaving she was working on helping Morning Dove with the cooking. But her mind kept drifting to the coming meeting, playing out possible conversations, imagining scenarios both wonderful and disastrous. Finally, when the sun began its descent toward the horizon, she told her aunt she was going to gather cattails by the river. Morning Dove simply nodded, but Violet caught the small smile on her face and knew she was not fooled. The walk to the cottonwood took half an hour, and with each step, Violet's nervousness grew. What if he did not come? What if he had thought better of it, realized the complications were too much? Or worse, what if he came with bad intentions, thinking an Apache woman would be easy prey? But when she reached the tree, he was already there, sitting with his back against the trunk, his hat beside him. He stood when he saw her, and the smile that crossed his face was so genuine, so open, that her fears evaporated. I was worried I had the wrong tree, he said. There are several cottonwoods along this stretch, but only one growing alone away from the others. Violet gestured to the tree. My mother used to say it was like her, strong enough to stand without the forest. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Violet sat down on the grass and Jake settled beside her, keeping a respectful distance. The river burbled nearby, the sound peaceful. She died of a fever 2 winters ago. She was only 38, I am sorry. My mother died when I was 16. Childbirth. The baby died too. They sat in silence for a moment, sharing grief without words. Then Jake asked, What was your mother's name, Sparrow? Her Apache name was longer, but that was what she was called most often. She was small and quick and brave. Like her daughter, then. Violet glanced at him. You do not know if I am brave. You walked into that store knowing how Peterson would treat you, but you did it anyway because your uncle needed help. You are sitting here with me even though you know what people would say if they saw. That is brave, or foolish. Sometimes the same thing. He picked up a small stone and tossed it toward the river. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me if it is too personal. You can ask. How did you end up here in Stillwater? You said your uncle brought you, but where from? Violet drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. North of here in the mountains. That was our home, our people's land for generations. But the government wanted us gone, wanted us on the reservation near San Carlos. Some went peacefully, others fought. My father fought. She paused, the memories sharp. He was killed by soldiers when I was 16. My mother, my uncle, his wife, and I fled. We survived by staying hidden, moving often, but my mother died, and it is just the three of us now. I am sorry. Jake's voice was thick with emotion. The way your people have been treated, it is wrong. I know that is not worth much, me saying it, but it is true. It is worth something. Violet looked at him. Most white people do not admit it. They pretend we are savages, that we deserve what happens to us. You are not savages. You are people trying to live same as anyone else. They talked as the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink. Jake told her about growing up in Colorado, about his 3 older brothers who were all settled with wives and children, about his father who ran a successful ranch, but had a temper that Jake tried to avoid. He talked about coming to Arizona territory, seeking something he could not quite name, some purpose beyond working cattle for someone else's profit. Violet told him about learning to weave from her grandmother, about the foods her people gathered and how to prepare them, about the stories passed down through generations. She found herself laughing at his jokes, feeling herself relax in a way she had not since before her mother died. When the sky began to darken in earnest, she said reluctantly, I should go back. Can I see you again? Here or wherever you feel safe. Here is good. Tomorrow. Jake stood and offered his hand to help her up. Violet took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. He held on perhaps a moment longer than necessary, and she did not pull away. Be careful going back, he said. You as well. They parted at the tree, walking in opposite directions. Violet looked back once and saw him do the same, and they both smiled before continuing on their separate ways. This became their pattern. Every day for 2 weeks, they met at the cottonwood tree. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, watching the river. Jake brought her gifts, small things. A ribbon for her hair, a piece of hard candy, a book he thought she might like. Violet was astonished he knew she could read, until she realized she had mentioned her mother teaching her. He remembered everything she told him. She brought him things too. A bracelet she wove from grass, some of the dried meat Mourning Dove prepared, a small carving her uncle had made. Jake treasured each item as if it were gold. On the 15th day, Jake took her hand as they sat side by side. Violet, I need to tell you something. Her heart thudded. What is it? I am falling in love with you. I know it is fast. I know it is complicated. I know there are 100 reasons this is a bad idea. But I cannot keep pretending this is just friendly meetings. I think about you constantly. I dream about you. And if you do not feel the same, I will accept that and we can go back to being friends, but I had to tell you. Violet stared at their joined hands, her mind racing. She had known, of course. Had felt it in the way he looked at her, the care he took with his words, the joy in his face when she arrived. But hearing him say it made it real in a way that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. I feel the same, she whispered. I have tried to be sensible, but I cannot help it. I love you too." Jake exhaled as if he had been holding his breath. "Thank God. I was so worried you would say no that I had misread everything." "You did not misread anything." Violet turned to face him fully. "But Jake, you know how hard this will be. People will hate us for being together, both your people and mine." "I do not care what people think." "You say that now, but when they spit at you in the street, when they refuse to do business with you, when your friends turn their backs, then they are not real friends." Jake cupped her face with his free hand. "Violet, I have spent my whole life trying to fit into a space that was not made for me, following rules that did not make sense, being who people expected me to be. For the first time, I feel like I can be myself. That is because of you. I am not giving that up because small-minded people cannot see past their prejudices." Violet felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I am afraid." "I am too, but I am more afraid of losing you." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their lips met softly, tentatively, and Violet felt something inside her unfold like a flower in sunlight. She had never been kissed before, had never wanted to be, but this felt right in a way she could not have articulated. Jake was gentle, his hand in her hair, his other arm coming around to pull her closer. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I love you," he said again. "I love you," she replied, and saying it aloud made it more real than anything else. They held each other as darkness fell completely, and for the first time in years, Violet felt something like hope. The next weeks were blissful and terrifying in turns. They met every day, growing bolder. Jake kissed her often now, and Violet found she could not get enough of him. They made plans, wild and impractical and wonderful. They would leave Stillwater, go somewhere where no one knew them, where an Apache woman and a white cowboy could marry and build a life. California, maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere new where old hatreds had not yet taken root. But reality intruded, as it always does. On a hot morning in August, Violet was in town trading her weaving for flour when she saw Peterson, the storekeeper, talking to a group of men. She would have passed by without attention except she heard Jake's name. "Foster is a fool," Peterson was saying. "Everyone has seen him sneaking off with that Apache girl. It is disgusting." "Someone should teach him a lesson," another man said. "Remind him what happens when you consort with Indians. Or teach her a lesson. She is probably using some kind of witchcraft on him." The men laughed, and Violet felt ice in her veins despite the heat. She hurried away, her mind racing. She had known there would be talk, but this was more than talk. This was threat. She found Running Deer and Mourning Dove and told them everything. Her uncle listened gravely, and when she finished, he said, "You must stop seeing him." "I cannot. I love him." "Love will not protect you from men like that. They will hurt you, Violet. They might kill you both." "He is right," Mourning Dove said softly. "This cowboy, Jake, he is a good man. But good men cannot stop bullets or ropes. Then we will leave, go somewhere else. And how will you live? What money do you have? How will you travel?" Running Deer's voice was not unkind, but it was firm. "You are thinking with your heart, not your head." "My heart is not wrong just because it is difficult," Running Deer sighed. "I am not saying your heart is wrong. I am saying the world is cruel and love is not always enough." Violet knew he was right, but she also knew she could not give Jake up. Not now, not after finding something so precious. She had to warn him, had to tell him about the threat. They would figure out what to do together. She went to the cottonwood early, pacing beneath its branches, her nerves stretched taut. When Jake arrived, he took one look at her face and said, "What happened?" She told him about the men, about their words, about her uncle's warnings. Jake's expression darkened with anger. "They will not touch you. I will not let them." You cannot stop them if they come as a group. Jake, this is serious. They could hurt you. I am more worried about them hurting you. Jake pulled her close. Maybe your uncle is right. Maybe we should leave, the sooner the better. And go where, with what money? We would be lucky to get 50 miles before we ran out of everything. Jake was quiet for a moment. I have some money saved, not a lot, but enough to get us started. And I can work anywhere. Ranches always need hands. But if we leave now, they will know, they will come after us. Not if we are smart about it. We leave separately, meet up somewhere outside of town, head west toward California. There are missions there, priests who might marry us even if no one else will. Violet's mind whirled with the implications. Leaving would mean abandoning her uncle and mourning Dove, the only family she had left. It would mean traveling through dangerous territory with few resources. But staying meant eventually facing those angry men, meant hiding and sneaking and living in constant fear. I need to think about it, she said finally. Of course. Take whatever time you need. Jake kissed her forehead. But Violet, whatever we decide together. I am not leaving without you, and I am not letting you face this alone. That night, Violet lay awake, her mother's necklace clutched in her hand. She wished desperately that Sparrow were here, that she could ask her mother what to do. But Sparrow was gone, and Violet had to make this choice herself. In the morning, she told Running Deer and Mourning Dove that she was going to leave with Jake. Her uncle's face was pained but unsurprised. When? Soon. A few days, maybe. We need to prepare carefully. Mourning Dove hugged her tightly. You are sure this is what you want? I am sure I cannot live without him. I am sure staying here will only end badly. Beyond that, I am not sure of anything. That is honest, at least. Running Deer stood and went to the corner of their small dwelling. He returned with a leather pouch. Take this. It is not much, but it will help. Violet opened it to find coins and a few bills. Uncle, no. This is all you have. And you are my sister's daughter, the last of her blood. I will not let you go into the world with nothing. He pressed the pouch into her hands. Take it, use it wisely. Violet embraced him, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for everything, for taking me in, for caring for me. You are family, that is what family does. The next 3 days were spent in preparation. Violet gathered what supplies she could carry, mended her clothing, packed her few precious possessions. Jake did the same, selling his saddle to buy a wagon and a horse, bartering for food and blankets and ammunition. They planned their route, deciding to head southwest toward Tucson first, then west to California. It would take weeks, maybe months, but it was possible. On the 4th day, they agreed to meet at midnight, 2 miles south of town where the old mine road branched off. Violet would walk there and Jake would come with the wagon. From there, they would disappear into the darkness. Violet said goodbye to her uncle and Mourning Dove with a heavy heart. Running Deer gave her his blessing, and Mourning Dove gave her herbs and advice. Be safe, be smart, and be happy. That is all we want for you. I will try. More than try, do it. Your mother would want you to be happy. Violet nodded, too choked up to speak. Then she slipped out into the night, her small bundle on her back, her mother's necklace around her neck. The stars overhead were brilliant, the moon a silver crescent. She walked quickly, alert for any sound of pursuit. She reached the meeting place early and waited in the shadow of a large boulder. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Violet's mind conjured every possible disaster. Jake had been caught, or he had changed his mind, or someone had seen him leaving and followed. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Then she heard it. The creak of wagon wheels, the soft plod of hooves. Jake materialized out of the darkness, and relief flooded through her so powerfully she felt weak. Sorry I am late, he whispered, helping her up onto the wagon seat. Had to take a roundabout route to make sure no one saw. You made it. That is all that matters. Jake snapped the reins and the horse moved forward, pulling them away from Stillwater, away from everything Violet had known. She looked back once, seeing the faint lights of the town in the distance, then turned her face forward. Toward the future, whatever it might hold. They traveled through the night, putting as much distance between themselves and Stillwater as possible. When dawn broke, pink and gold across the desert, they were 20 miles away and still moving. Jake found a sheltered spot behind a rock formation where they could rest and hide the wagon. "We will sleep during the day, travel at night," he said. "At least for the first few days. Once we are far enough away, we can move normally." Violet nodded, too exhausted to do more. They made a cold camp, not daring to light a fire, and ate dried meat and hardtack. Then they curled up together in the back of the wagon, covered with blankets, and slept. Violet woke in the afternoon to the sound of horses. She was instantly alert, her hand finding Jake's shoulder and shaking him awake. He heard it too, his body tensing. They peered out from beneath the blanket covering the wagon. 3 riders were moving across the desert, perhaps half a mile away. Too far to tell who they were, but Jake cursed softly. "What is it?" Violet whispered. "The one on the left, that is Charlie Turner. He must have told someone I left." "Will they find us?" "Not if we stay quiet and do not move." They waited, barely breathing, as the riders passed. The men seemed to be searching, their heads swiveling, but they did not come close to the rock formation. Eventually, they disappeared over a rise and the sound of hooves faded. "They will keep looking," Violet said, "probably. Which means we need to be smarter." Jake thought for a moment. "We will head south first toward the border. They will expect us to go west. Once we lose them, we can circle back and head to California." It was not the plan they had made, but it was sensible. They waited until full dark, then set out again, this time angling south. The terrain grew rougher, rockier, less forgiving. They saw no more riders, but the knowledge that they were being hunted added tension to every mile. On the 3rd night, they reached a small settlement, barely more than a cluster of adobe buildings and a well. Jake went in to buy supplies while Violet waited with the wagon. He returned with food, water, and news. "There is a bounty on us," he said grimly. "Some of the men in Stillwater posted a reward for information leading to our capture. They are saying I kidnapped you, that you are under some kind of spell." Violet felt anger burn in her chest. "Of course they would say that. They cannot imagine I would choose you willingly. We need to be even more careful. People will be looking for reward money." They pushed on, traveling longer hours, taking fewer chances. The nights blurred together into a haze of sore muscles and constant vigilance. But they also had moments of peace, of quiet conversation under the stars, of holding each other close in the darkness. Violet found that even exhausted and afraid, she was happier than she had been in years, because she was with Jake, and they were choosing this life together. After a week, they crossed into Mexico. The border was unmarked but understood, a change in the feel of the land. They stopped in a tiny village where no one asked questions and everyone was willing to trade. Jake bought information about the best routes west, and they stocked up on supplies that would last them weeks if necessary. "Once we get to California, we will find a priest," Jake said as they camped that night. "Get married properly. Will a priest marry us? Some refuse to marry Apache people. Then we will find one who will, even if I have to ask 100 of them." Violet smiled and kissed him. "You are stubborn." "So are you. It is one of the things I love about you." They made love that night for the first time, a slow and tender exploration that left Violet feeling cherished and whole. Afterward, lying in Jake's arms under a blanket of stars, she thought about her mother, about how Sparrow had always wanted Violet to be brave, to fight for her own happiness. She hoped her mother would approve of this choice. The journey west took another month. They encountered bandits once, but Jake's quick thinking and Violet's knowledge of the terrain allowed them to escape. They ran low on water twice and had to dig for it in dry riverbeds. They weathered a sandstorm that nearly tore their wagon apart. But they also saw incredible beauty. Sunsets that painted the whole sky, fields of wildflowers blooming against all odds, mountains that rose like cathedrals. When they finally reached California in late September, the relief was overwhelming. They made their way to a mission near Los Angeles, a sprawling complex of white buildings and bells. The priest there, Father Miguel, was an older man with kind eyes. He listened to their story without judgment. "You wish to be married?" he asked in accented English. "Yes, Father," Jake said. "More than anything." Father Miguel looked at Violet. "And you, daughter, you wish this as well?" "I do," Violet said firmly. "Then I will marry you." God does not care about the color of your skin, only the love in your hearts. They were married the next day, a simple ceremony in the mission chapel. Violet wore her mother's necklace, and Jake wore a clean shirt he had bought in the village. There were no guests except for a few curious locals, but it did not matter. When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife and Jake kissed her, Violet felt a joy so complete it brought tears to her eyes. They stayed near the mission for a few weeks, Jake finding work at a nearby ranch and Violet helping the mission's nuns with their weaving and cooking. They lived in a small adobe house that the mission rented to them cheaply, and for the first time since leaving Stillwater, they could relax, could breathe without looking over their shoulders. "We could stay here," Jake said one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset. "It is not a bad place. It is a good place," Violet agreed, "but it is not ours." "What do you mean?" "I mean we are still living on someone else's land by someone else's grace. I want something that belongs to us." Jake was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "You are right. We should find our own place." They saved money through the fall and winter, Jake working hard at the ranch and taking odd jobs when he could. Violet sold her weavings and learned to make soap and candles that she could trade. By spring of 1879, they had saved enough to buy a small piece of land in a valley north of the mission, 40 acres with a creek running through it. The land was wild and overgrown, but it had good soil and plenty of water. Jake built them a cabin with help from some of the ranch hands who had become friends. Violet planted a garden and started a small flock of chickens. It was hard work, the kind that left them exhausted and sore every night, but it was theirs. One evening in June, as they sat on the porch of their finished cabin, Violet said, "I am pregnant." Jake nearly dropped the cup he was holding. "What? Are you sure?" "Very sure. The baby will come in winter, I think." Jake whooped with joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her protests. "We are having a baby. Violet, we are having a baby," she laughed, his happiness infectious. "Yes, we are. Are you happy about it?" "Happy. I am more than happy. I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled." "Me too." They held each other as the sun set, talking about names and nurseries and all the things they would teach their child. Violet thought about her mother, about how proud Sparrow would have been to become a grandmother. She touched the necklace at her throat and sent up a silent prayer of thanks. Their son was born in January of 1880, a cold night made warm by the fire Jake kept burning. The birth was hard, and Violet was grateful for the midwife Jake had brought from the mission. But when she held her baby for the first time, saw his dark eyes and dusting of black hair, every moment of pain was forgotten. "What should we name him?" Jake asked, his finger grasped in the baby's tiny hand. "I would like to name him Sparrow for my mother." "But the English version, that would be William. William Foster, I like it." Jake kissed her forehead. "He is perfect. You are perfect." William was a healthy, happy baby, and he transformed their lives in ways Violet had not anticipated. The love she felt for him was fierce and consuming, and watching Jake with their son made her fall in love with her husband all over again. Jake was a devoted father, patient and playful, willing to walk the floor at night when William was fussy or change diapers without complaint. The years passed in a blur of seasons and small milestones. William learned to walk, to talk, to help with the chickens. Jake expanded their land, buying another 20 acres and building a small barn for horses. Violet's garden flourished, and she became known in the area for her woven baskets and blankets. They were not rich, but they were comfortable and happy. In 1882, their daughter was born, a girl they named Sarah after Jake's mother. She had Jake's blue eyes and Violet's dark hair, and William was immediately protective of his baby sister. 2 years later, another son arrived, Matthew, who was quieter than his siblings but observant and smart. Life was not always easy. They faced droughts and storms, sick livestock and crop failures. There were still people who looked at them askance, who whispered about the white man married to the Indian woman. But there were also friends, good people who judged them by their character rather than their heritage. Father Miguel visited often, blessing their children and sharing meals. The ranch hands Jake had worked with became regular guests, teaching William to ride and rope. Violet stayed in touch with running deer and mourning dove through letters carried by travelers. Her uncle wrote that they were well, that they thought of her often, that they were proud of the life she had built. When William was 5, Violet decided it was time for her children to meet their great-uncle and great-aunt. The journey back to Arizona Territory was bittersweet. Stillwater had grown, new buildings replacing old, new faces replacing those Violet remembered. But the prejudices were still there, the suspicion. They did not stay in town, instead going directly to the camp, where running deer and mourning dove still lived. The reunion was emotional, tears and laughter mixed together. Running deer had aged, his hair now white, but his eyes were still sharp. Mourning dove fussed over the children, delighted by their energy and curiosity. They stayed a week, and Violet taught her children about their Apache heritage, the stories and songs her mother had taught her. Jake listened too, learning alongside their children, asking questions and showing respect. On the last night, Running Deer took Violet aside. "You have done well, niece. Your mother would be proud. I hope so. I think about her every day. She is with you, in your strength, in your love for your family. She lives on." He gestured to the necklace at her throat, the one that had started everything. "And in that, it brought you to your husband, brought you to this life. It is powerful medicine." Violet touched the turquoise stones. "It is. I will pass it to Sarah when she is old enough, and she will pass it to her daughter. So Mother's legacy continues." They returned to California, to their home and their land. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. William wanted to be a rancher like his father. Sarah wanted to be a teacher, inspired by the mission school she attended. Matthew was fascinated by building things, by how structures stood up and fit together. In 1890, Jake and Violet celebrated their 10th anniversary. They were both in their 30s now, older and more settled but no less in love. Jake had silver threading through his hair, and Violet had lines at her eyes from years of sun and laughter. They threw a party, inviting everyone they knew, and danced under the stars while their children watched and friends played music. "I cannot believe it has been 10 years, Jake said as they swayed together. "Feels like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean. Sometimes I still feel like that scared girl in the store, selling her mother's necklace." and I am still the cowboy who could not walk away." Jake kissed her softly. "Best decision I ever made, buying that necklace, but giving it back was even better. You gave me more than the necklace back. You gave me a life, a family, a future. We gave each other those things. We built this together." They held each other close as the music played on, surrounded by the life they had created through love and courage and sheer, stubborn determination. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. William grew into a fine young man, taking over more of the ranch work as Jake's back began to bother him. Sarah did become a teacher, opening a small school on their property for local children. Matthew went to work for a builder in Los Angeles, but came home often, bringing gifts and stories of the city. Violet became a grandmother in 1895 when William married a local girl named Emma, and they had a daughter. Holding her granddaughter, Violet felt the circle of life complete itself. She thought of Sparrow, of how her mother had held her the same way, and she understood finally the depth of a mother's love, the way it echoed through generations. Jake's hair went fully gray, and his joints ached in the cold, but his eyes still lit up when Violet entered a room. They would sit together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, hands clasped together, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. "You ever regret it?" Violet asked one evening in 1900. They were both in their 40s now, their children grown. "Leaving your family, your life in Colorado for me?" Jake looked at her as if she had said something absurd. "Not for one second. Not even when times were hard, not even when people were cruel. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Violet. You and our children and this life we built. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. I love you. I love you too. Always have, always will." Sarah married a teacher she met in Los Angeles, a good man who treated her with respect and kindness. Matthew married a few years later, a girl from the city, and they settled there permanently. William and Emma had 2 more children, both boys, and they took over the ranch as Jake and Violet began to slow down. In 1905, Running Deer passed away in his sleep. Mourning Dove wrote to Violet, and though she grieved, Violet was grateful her uncle had lived long enough to see her happy, to know that she had made a good life. Mourning Dove came to live with them after that, spending her final years surrounded by family, teaching the great-grandchildren the old stories and ways. Jake's father passed in 1908, and to everyone's surprise, he left Jake a portion of the ranch in Colorado. Jake's brothers contested it, but the will was clear. Jake sold his share and used the money to expand their land further, to build a better house, to ensure their children and grandchildren would always have something to fall back on. By 1910, Jake and Violet had been married for over 30 years. They were in their 50s, their hair gray, their bodies marked by age and hard work. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young woman with a necklace and the young cowboy who could not bear to take something precious from her. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their grandchildren play, Violet said, "We have had a good life." "The best life," Jake agreed. "I could not have asked for anything more." "Do you remember that day in Peterson's store, like it was yesterday? You were so brave, standing there even though he treated you terribly. I saw that necklace and I knew I had to buy it. And then, when you looked so sad taking the money, I could not let you lose it. I had to give it back. That was the moment I started falling in love with you, I think. When you gave it back, I could not understand why you would do it, but it made me want to know you. And now you are stuck with me. Happily stuck." Violet leaned her head on his shoulder. "I hope our children remember our story, tell it to their children. About how love can cross any divide if you are brave enough. They will remember. How could they forget? It is in everything we built, everything we are. The sun set in brilliant colors, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple. The grandchildren's laughter rang out clear and joyful. Somewhere in the house, Sarah was playing piano while Emma sang. It was a perfect moment, the kind that life occasionally gifts when you are not looking for it. Violet touched the necklace at her throat, the turquoise still bright after all these years. She thought of her mother, of Running Deer, of all the people who had brought her to this moment. And she felt grateful, deeply and completely grateful, for every choice that had led her here. Jake took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that plagued him. "I love you, Violet Foster. I love you, Jake Foster." They sat together as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that would echo through generations. The necklace gleamed at Violet's throat, a reminder of where it had all begun, a symbol of love given freely and returned tenfold. Their story was not over, not quite yet. There would be more years, more grandchildren, more sunsets watched together. But in that moment, everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. An Apache woman and a cowboy, brought together by a turquoise necklace and sustained by a love that had weathered every storm. And when the end did come, many years later, they went peacefully within days of each other, as if neither could bear to be without the other even in death. Their children buried them on their land, beneath the oak tree Jake had planted the year William was born. The necklace was passed to Sarah, who wore it with pride and told her children the story of how a single act of kindness had changed everything. The ranch stayed in the family, generation after generation, a testament to what Jake and Violet had built. The story of the Apache woman and the cowboy became family legend, told and retold, embellished but never exaggerated because the truth was remarkable enough. The necklace was passed down through the daughters of the family, each one treasuring it as Violet had, each one understanding that it represented more than just turquoise and silver. It represented courage and love, and the power of choosing kindness in a world that often chose cruelty. And though Jake and Violet were gone, their love remained, woven into the land they had tended, the children they had raised, the life they had built together. It remained in every sunrise over the ranch, in every meal shared around a family table, in every act of kindness passed between strangers. Because that was the true legacy of the cowboy who bought a necklace and gave it back, and the Apache woman who dared to love him. Not wealth or fame, but love, pure and enduring, a light that would never fade. The end came gently for both of them, as gentle as their love had been fierce. Jake passed first in his sleep, at the age of 72. Violet held his hand as his breathing slowed, and when it stopped, she felt as if part of her soul had gone with him. But she did not despair. She had known from the beginning that loving him meant eventually losing him, and she had chosen to love him anyway. She lived 3 more days, long enough to see all her children gather, to hold her grandchildren one more time, to pass Sarah the necklace with shaking hands. "Tell them," she whispered to her daughter, "tell them how love conquers all if you are brave enough to let it." "I will, Mama, I promise." Violet closed her eyes and thought of Jake, of that first moment in the store when their eyes had met, of the cottonwood tree by the river, of every kiss and laugh and quiet moment they had shared. She thought of her mother, Sparrow, and felt that she would see her soon. When morning came, Violet had joined Jake, wherever souls go when they leave this world. The family mourned, but they also celebrated, because the love Jake and Violet had shared was not something to grieve. It was something to honor, to aspire to carry forward. And so the story ended, not with sadness but with the understanding that some loves are too powerful to be contained by a single lifetime. They ripple outward, touching everyone they encounter, creating waves that never quite settle. The necklace continued its journey through the family, a physical reminder of a love story that had defied expectations and endured through everything. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this world, an Apache woman and a cowboy walked hand in hand, their love eternal, their story complete.